to Navigating Neva. I am your host, Neva Nicole, and we are here to explore the human side of aquatics, water safety, and healing through lived experiences. Today's episode is tender and powerful. Our guest, Emily Diamond, is here to share her story of witnessing a drowning, an experience that has changed her life forever, and we're so grateful for her courage and openness. As always, I am your host, and with me is Wesley King.
Hey everyone, honored to be here. Excited to get into a topic we haven't gotten into yet, and so looking forward to having this discussion. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. And Emily, let's introduce you. You are our guest tonight. What can you say?
Yeah, well, hi guys. I am very excited to get out there and actually talk about this story. I have talked to a lot of family and friends, and just locally. I've never actually talked about my story publicly in this kind of manner. So I'm actually really excited to talk about it, get it out there, and see if it can relate to anyone else who has been through similar situations.
That's why we
Well,
do this.
that is why we do this. We have another podcast that talks about an incident, but the person lived in that incident. So you are truly our first guest
Mhm.
ever on Navigating Neva to talk about something this heavy. So we're very grateful that you're here and willing to share your story. There are a lot of people I know in town that aren't where you are yet, and they're not ready to share. And I always tell them that's okay. We're here when they are, because I feel that it's an educational moment and it can help anybody, but not everybody is able to share. So we do appreciate you for coming on here to share it with us.
Absolutely. And key word I think you said was in town. Everybody, sadly, a lot of people listening to this can relate to the in town, in community part of it. So I think there's
Mhm.
a special piece there too. So absolutely.
So, can you share what happened on this day? Like just setting the scene, like what was happening during the day or where you were, or just tell the audience where you live.
Yeah, of course. So I was born and raised right here in Little Brunswick, Georgia. This incident happened back in 2014. I was 17 years old, and it was actually the summer of my junior year. I had just gotten out my junior year, and we were out for summer, and a lot of my friends, we used to go out to this little man-made lake off of Highway 99, and it was called Juliet Circle. And there was a rope swing there, just summer fun. So we just got out there and met up and went swimming. It was a very hot day. It was by mid-afternoon, maybe 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Um, but yeah, it definitely is a forever part of me now. So
And was this a place you'd been before? You'd mentioned, and only to help the audience along a little bit, there's a lot of similarities to maybe what you might have experienced or your community might experience, right? A local property, somewhere
mhm,
that is frequent. So tell us about this. Again, whatever comfort level you're at
mhm.
with it, but tell us a little bit background, if you would, of your experience with this lake in this area before. Had you been there? Had anything ever happened there before, etc.?
So no incidents that I knew of happened there previously to the incident that happened with me that day. That was my second time ever actually being out there. I'd been out there another time before, and I got introduced to a group of friends to go out there. So this was actually the second time that I actually went out there when the incident happened. But that was a hot spot for kids to go for the summer to go
There we
swimming.
go. Sure.
Free, right? I mean, you don't have to pay 17 or 24 or 39 or $7 to get in. You just
Right.
go where it's cool. Go where there's water. Not always
Yeah.
cool water in Georgia, but there's water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right off the lake, right there. I mean, if I think of, I'm in Chicago, I think of Evanston Beach, which you got to pay for. But I think of all the communities with beaches, Iowa, Illinois, Michigan, right? You just walk right off the beach and there's the water. Is that, I mean, I haven't been there, but is that a pretty accurate description?
So this literally, it's gonna sound crazy. Brunswick, Georgia is more it's very southern. There, it's crazy. We do have a water park here. We've got beaches. We're right next to St. Simon's Island, Jekyll Island. So we've got beach access. We've got pools. We've got a water park on Jekyll Island, but this lake that we were out at was literally off of a highway, and there was a trail that everybody knew to
Oh,
go to, and it was like this just man-made lake, and they put a rope
okay.
out there. It was just something cool in the woods. It was like this lake in the woods, and all the kids knew about it. So even though we had other access to other bodies of water that we could have went to, it was just the cool lake spot, I guess, that people went to. And
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I think what it was, Wes, is we make subdivisions down here and they
Ah,
just go over here and they dig up the dirt. And it
Yeah.
wasn't like it was a construction site, but they had pulled the dirt from there. So I know Florida, I know somebody recently was talking about this where they were talking about we
t
don't have fences
Texas.
around, well, yeah, you don't have fences around
Yeah.
creeks and you don't have fences around rivers, but in Georgia, I know in Georgia it happens a lot. I think it was happening in Florida with some lawsuits I read about, is that construction sites will start and then it rains or they just go deep enough that it gets rain. And for the kids, it's free and
Sure.
it's local. Like you don't want to go where
Mhm.
it's packed and you might not be able to drive 30 or 45 minutes from out in the Sterling area or the Brunswick area to get to these touristy places.
Right.
So it is a kid hangout for sure. But I mean, a rope swing, come on, it's fun. That's all you
Oh,
had to
Yeah.
and
say,
the
right?
trail, right?
Yeah,
And again, the
right.
trail path, and so that's exciting. And so, anyway, not to divert, because I know we there, but helping people understand the type of environment you're in, I think
Mhm.
gives a lot of context to say local places need to be evaluated as well.
Yeah,
So,
of course.
and so going back, you were there. Tell us, when did the Spidey sense go off, if you don't mind? When did the hair at the back of the neck stand up? When did you kind of start to see or realize something wasn't right, if you don't mind?
So here's the thing. So, I mean, I did grow up going to the pools, going to the beaches, but the lake was something different, was something fun for us to do for the summer. So, I actually, when I was younger, I was, I went to the YWCA, and I was on the swim team when I was younger. So, I'd already, I was very confident that I could swim. And so while we were out there at the lake that day, it was kind of my decision. I chose to go across the lake, and this lake was pretty wide in diameter. I mean, there was a good bit of ways around this lake. I mean, it would take you a long time to walk around to the other side, and
Gotcha.
I was pretty confident enough to walk or to I'm sorry to swim across it. And my friend Jordan, his name was Jordan, he decided to swim out there behind me, and I guess I guess he didn't want to be outswam by a girl, and
Sure.
so he was swimming across the lake with me, clearing the lake. That's what I was doing.
Uh-huh. And
But
maybe Jordan didn't have the YWC
yeah,
background. And did you
well,
know, or go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
so there's a little bit more to this story that I didn't go into full detail about. My friend Jordan that followed me across this lake. A year prior to us going swimming this summer, he got into a bad car accident. A drunk driver had hit him, and he had a swollen spleen. And so it hadn't been a year prior to that, and I guess his spleen wasn't fully healed. So this day that we swam across this lake, like I said, he wasn't fully healed. So I was probably about a quarter away from the other side of the lake when I noticed that he was behind me, starting to,
Mm. And you already gone so far ahead. And
yeah.
as you, again, not this is heavy stuff, but just again for audience context, hot day, Georgia,
Hmm.
sweaty. Now we
Hmm.
know the previous health history, right? In lifeguarding
Hmm.
world, we're taught to ask the sample acronym, and this is why. I mean, not to mix too many bags here, but this is why we ask these questions. And
Yeah.
Emily, you sharing these details helps people understand that previous injuries and weather and anyway, yeah, okay, yeah.
So
Now
just
that
to
I
Go.
think
pause
about it,
in the story, you said you went all the way across, but how do you know how deep it was? Could he stand in this part? Do you have
Good
any idea
question.
the depth?
Yeah.
no. So this
Were there
lake,
even
I want to
markers?
say, I want to say,
No,
it
sorry.
was about 11. Okay, so the lake it dived down, right? So in the middle of the lake, it went down to about 11 to 12 feet deep.
Okay.
Um, I remember that day that when it happened. Um, you know, he went down, and then I remember them telling me the diet, like how deep it was when they had to go, the rescue team had to go out there to go
Yeah.
find him. You made a good point about that, though. It is very important with people with underlying issues or previous injuries, to keep in mind before you go swimming. Um, that's very important to know, because it could help to save somebody's life. I was 17 at the time. I was a kid, so
Yeah. You all were kids, and to kind of give some real administrative aspect to this, and maybe for the audience members too, and even for you, Emily, to take some emotion out of it. My guess was there probably weren't a lot of life jackets available there. My guess was there wasn't a lot of visual signage there,
mhm,
universal language we call it in the industry, with images and posters, and maybe there is now. And maybe if you're listening in your lake or your beach or your local watering hole, as you will, not your drinking alcohol hole, your literal watering hole,
mhm,
doesn't have these things. This is why we have these conversations, so that we can
mhm.
hear what didn't exist, over 10 years ago. So again, Emily, is there anything that stands out, from rescue equipment to phones to, or were we all kind of absence of those things?
So literally, we were just, I guess just southern little country kids
Kids
out
on a
in the
beach.
middle of the woods, in
Yeah,
this man-made lake. There was no safety flotation devices. There was just lots and lots of people out there. There was a
sure.
ton of people out there.
Grills, cooking
And
out,
yeah,
right?
but maybe cooking
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
Yeah, a lot of people out there on their golf carts, four wheelers, stuff like that. But
sure.
definitely no warning signs, no flotation devices, nothing like that. I mean, we
Right.
were just out in the sticks.
And it never happened before. And whether it's crystal blue water, whether it's man-made water, whether it's fish and
Mhm,
water, I think this is some, and I know there's advocates for Lake Michigan advocates all across this country that work hard to get simple signage up, simple rescue equipment up,
mhm.
and it's situations like this, I think, that help people understand. Yeah, we can have a good time, but when one of us tries to swim too far or we're out of our depths, there comes a lot of challenges with that. Yeah.
Right.
Fair.
So, who you were swimming across the lake and he was
Oh,
behind you. Was
yes.
anybody
Yeah.
else crossing the lake with you, or were any other people in the water at the time? Or
So there was a shallow end where we first started at this one portion of the lake where we are at the shallow. There was a ton of people in the water. I made the decision to want to clear the lake because I knew I could swim, and I'd swim when I was younger, and so I took off and started swimming across the lake. And my friend Jordan started to follow me, and it was just me and him. Everybody else kind of stayed near the shallow end. Um,
since
you
you've
know,
been on swim team before, how far out do you feel you were? Were you like the length
Yeah.
of a pool, like 25 yards away from them, or like 50, like the outdoor Y pool? Like how?
Or a golf ball shot.
Um, probably maybe a golf ball shot. I mean, this was a pretty wide lake.
Yeah.
I know in like the newspaper police reporting, it says it in there, and I had that stashed away. I could tell you exactly,
Oh,
but
that's okay.
this was a very large in diameter lake, and I want to say it was about 11 to 12 feet deep in the middle. So
Right.
it
And it
was a
probably
fairly large
progressed.
lake.
It probably
Yeah,
went from 8 to 12 or
yeah.
somewhere. And that's, again, I mean, I grew up skiing on the Illinois River, and if you can learn to ski in that, you can learn to ski anywhere. But it doesn't tell you the width. It doesn't
Hmm.
tell you
Yeah.
up from one side to the other. And it's a
Right.
good question, Nicole, because that's what helps us understand what we can do and can't do around that
Yeah, it gives
space.
you a better visual of like how big it was. I mean, I know I swam a good ways because I was trying to make it to the other side.
Yeah.
I was being,
You were in a
tough kid,
race. Yeah, you
being
Right.
were
Yeah.
going
brave,
for the goal.
Yeah.
I guess it, and it wasn't me trying to show off being that I was a chick and I wanted to swim across the lake. I guess for me it was an adrenaline rush. I knew I could do it,
Sure.
and I was going for it. And Jordan just happened to be behind me doing it with me. And even though he was injured, it didn't work out for him. He cramped up behind me.
Yeah.
When it started, when I first noticed him, he started panicking, and I thought he was playing. I was 17 years old. I was a kid, I had never been in a situation, this fight or flight situation where I had immediately react and be on the scene. So I really thought he was playing around with me, and I was like, Jordan, stop playing around. Like you gotta stop. Like swim. Correctly. And it took me a second. I realized he wasn't playing at all, and
Sure.
and then that's when I jumped in and I immediately like I was a little bit before him. I was probably a third of the way away from the shore, the other side. We were already across the lake. I
You'd
was
already
like,
swam. Oh, yeah, you'd
he'd already,
exhausted
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And so I was in front of him and I turned around a little bit, go back towards him, and that's when I tried to grab him. I put my arms underneath his rib cage and I squeezed him. And I guess he had the swollen spleen and maybe he was, like I said, he wasn't properly healed. When I squeezed him to pull him up out of the water, that's when he started panicking and his hands went over my head. I went underneath the water. I got water in my lungs.
Hmm.
And at that moment, that's when I had to make my fight or flight decision. I was in so much pain, I couldn't breathe, and my chest was tight. And it felt like the worst asthma attack of my life. It's just, I had water in my lungs, and
Yeah.
I had to swim. I had to push myself away from him. And I just remember him letting me go. That was the thing that really did like that hurt me the most was I wanted to save him, but the fact that like I could have drowned right there with him, he I guess knew what was going on, like he felt it. He let me go and he had a hold of me. And I was able to swim backwards and I felt sand on my feet finally because I was swimming backwards to the
But
shore.
you guys were both underwater at this time because he was
Yeah,
underwater and you
Hmm.
were underwater and you felt the
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I swam backwards and I was at the shore and I was like trying to catch my breath, but I just remember like I was coughing and there was like water coming
I mean,
out of my mouth, like coming out of my
Sure.
lungs. Like it was like the worst kind of like phlegm filling, chest just full. And I watched him a few feet in front of me in the water and I watched his head go under and never come back up. And when I saw him in that moment, I just saw this most terrifying look on his face. And it has scarred me for life. Like I can still see his face in my head.
Sure.
And I just knew at that moment, like I knew that he was gonna go and I think he knew that he wasn't gonna make it.
hmm
And I watched him go under and never come back up. And something in me just like snapped and I actually fainted. I passed out on the
Mm.
sandbar. And next thing I know,
In the
EMT,
water.
I passed out yeah, like my legs were in the water and I was passed out on the sandbar. And next thing I know, EMTs are there. They're picking me up, putting me on the stretcher.
You were in shock too.
Mm-hmm.
How long
Yeah.
did you stay in did you go to the hospital?
I did. I was in the hospital. They put a tube down my throat and they had to pump some of the water out of my lungs. And
Yeah.
I remember when I came to, I was in my hospital bed and I had a bunch of friends around me, and it was the group of friends that I was with that day at the lake. And I just remember waking up from the hospital bed after they cleared my lungs. I was able to breathe at this point. Um, they were like, the doctor, the nurse, they were like, you made it, you're good, like you made it, we saved you. But I remember sitting there and my friends were crying and they were next to me and next to my bed. And I just looked at them and I said, where is Jordan? I was like, where is he? Like,
hmm
and they looked at me and the nurse came in there and she grabbed me, she grabbed my hand and she said, he didn't make it. And they all told me he didn't make it. And I asked how long, like, how long did it take for them to
For
go
him to
retrieve?
get saved.
Yeah, it took him 6 hours because he had floated into the middle of the lake. And I told you, this middle of the lake, it was like maybe, 11 feet deep. The lake just went at a slant down
Hmm.
the middle. And
No leveling off, just a direct.
his body just went straight down and it took rescuers on a little John boat out there in the lake,
Searching.
down there to try and find his body. And it took them 6 hours to find him.
Yeah.
So
So
That, yeah.
that's heavy. We said it was going to
Yeah.
be heavy, Wes. We warned the
We,
audience. I'm
oh,
gonna. You have to put the
everybody knew I
trigger
was gonna
warning on
cry.
our post. Yeah.
Yeah, we knew I was gonna cry. But I'm an easy crier too. I will say two things. One, on the global side of life, there are things in place that weren't there before. So if you are listening to this, there is the International Critical Incident for Lifeguards. It's free. You see it all over our posts. Talk to Tyler Anderson. Talk to me. Talk to Kate Connell. If if you have lived this life, if you have felt this, if you're walking this path with Emily and us and Nicole and I right now, reach out to ilcira.org, Sarah, and that's what that organization is for, is to support incidents and people that have been involved, lifeguards specifically.
So,
Second,
well, hold
oh,
on.
go
Let
ahead,
me tell
Nicole.
her
No,
a little
oh,
bit more
please,
about that.
please,
So,
yes.
this organization, Wes is a volunteer for it, and it's new. And I did a podcast a few weeks ago, and I shared my story when I had saved a child that I found lifeless in the water, and there was zero support. So whether you were a person like you or a person like me or managing a person like me or one of the people they're saving, there was nothing that existed before this. And this man that founded this program, it now exists. So, as staff and as the world changes, staff is trained more to make sure that people aren't just left alone, and that they can talk about these things. But that's what's so amazing. I was actually looking
Right.
for the business card I had that had the guy on there, but that's what Wes is talking about. That's
Right.
what it is. And Wes, is it for anybody, or do
It,
businesses have to pay for it? Can anybody talk to these people?
there's a hotline, and I should have had it in front of me, and I apologize. Tyler can yell at me later. And that's why I'm fumbling through it, because that it's designed to take you step by step. It's for lifeguards specifically that have incurred these incidents, but really it's a global response. It's international, and if you're struggling through a trauma like this, even all these years later, this podcast again, when we want to know what brought you out of the woodwork, Emily, and we will get to that. That was point number 2, by the way. But I wanted to everybody, myself included, to catch our breath and say, how, what are we doing? What's changed? How can, and this is it. ILCRI. My God, Nicole, you're so much better. But ILCIRA.org. Ilcera.
Found it.
There you go. Tyler Anderson. Anyway, but and that's kind of what hit home for me is I've been doing this 30 years. Nicole's been doing this 30 years. We didn't have these type of things in place, and you didn't have it, Emily. And so that's what crushes me emotionally. That's why I'm stumbling over my words. But also, there's a sense of pride to know that the industry has taken some steps to be there emotionally and on the mental health side of people. So that was my first point. My second point is, how are you? What? How? Oh, sorry, Nicole. Go
Before
ahead,
we get to that, we are
please.
gonna move on to the next part. But I wanted to talk more about this. So I was just talking to the kids because I go and I
Please.
talk to kindergartners through fifth graders, and we just go over the American Red Cross
Oh,
Whales Toast
good.
program. So that happened like a week ago, and so did a drowning that went viral on. I don't know if either one of you
Yes, it
saw it.
did.
I
Yeah,
didn't see
It
true.
it.
was
I heard.
there was a drowning in Fort Lauderdale, I guess, at like a
Yeah.
hotel, and everybody's like, "Why didn't that guy save him?" And I'm like, "What?" Like, the one rule I keep going and preaching to all these kids is that we reach or we throw, but we don't go. Like, I don't need 2 victims, and I don't need to be in the water. So one, everybody that's listening, I want them to know, because I know not everybody lives in the aquatic culture. You're not supposed to go. A lifeguard that's trained is supposed to go, and a lifeguard has training, and all of the lifeguards now aren't even trained to go alone. Like, we are
Bingo.
trained to always have our tube with us, not to put ourselves in danger. So I think and I don't know if anybody's missing this, but the big point when I talked to Emily before, I didn't realize she was a victim. What happened is two
There.
people were drowning, and
Thank
Emily
you.
got to live.
Yes.
And Emily did drown, so everybody's always afraid of dry drowning. I did drown when I was 3, not a dry drowning, not a real drowning. I went underwater, came back up because someone brought me back up, but I was not conscious. I was gone, and I was not. I was gone,
My
and I was
brother, when he was
revived.
4.5. Yeah, when he was 4.5. Keep
But
going.
this
Yeah.
is what happened with Emily. She was conscious, but when everybody's fearful of these dry drownings, she got the water in, and then the water was in her lungs. She had to be hospitalized to get
Right.
the rest of the water out, and that's why she went unconscious. It's just a blessing that she saw all that. But because of all that, I wanted to mention I mean, I assume I know the answer, but just for the audience, why did you put yourself in danger? Because you knew he wasn't playing and you were the closest person and you weren't going to let your friend go out. I mean, is that why didn't you not go?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I guess some people, I honestly feel like some people have it in them, and some people, they're just frozen in shock. They have that bystander effect. For
Hmm.
me, I don't know what it is. Something in me just, I don't know. I saw the look on his face, and I had to run to him. I had to try and grab him, and I'm always that brave type. I know I'm a very tough person. I've been through a lot of other things in my life. And I guess for me, like I saw him and I was like, I gotta help him. So I jumped on the spot. Some
Yeah.
people that's very hard to do because people, this happens to people all the time. I was actually screaming for people out there at the lake that day. I was holding Jordan before I went under and I was screaming, help him. And I was like, help us, help him. Somebody come this way. No, I was screaming at top of
How
my
you
lungs.
got the water in your mouth. I
I
mean,
got water
just
in my
clinically,
mouth. I was
that's all
screaming,
that,
yeah.
yeah, it's how it all
And
happens.
everybody else on the other side of the lake, they were all stuck in that bystander effect. No one jumped in the water to start heading our way. It was
Yeah.
just me and him on that side of the lake. It was just me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I knew that
I
I
don't want to see the thing I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so
That's a lot to take
It is
in,
a lot.
and we appreciate you sharing it. Again, we've talked about this. It's not going to happen to me. It hasn't happened there before. It can't be happening in front of my face. And I think you experience all those things in real time, right? From all that
yeah.
perspective, and I think it's valuable. And Nicole mentioned this earlier. We have not had this type of in-depth discussion specifically outside of the aquatic professional. We've had all the discussions about how to prevent it, but hearing your perspective of, A, it happened to me, and us acknowledging that, you're a survivor, but then also here's things that we can help but people better understand moving forward. And so we just appreciate you sharing your story.
So,
Yeah, guys. I really appreciate you guys for letting me get on here and speak about it. It's I'm very strong right now. Before it took me a long time. It's been some years. It took me a long time for me to be able to speak out like this. So I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
so how long did you not talk? Like, people go through grief in different stages, and some
Mhm.
people process it really quick. Some people take years. Some people die and don't process it. How long after it happened did you, obviously you got emotional when you talked about it, but when
Mhm.
could you actually like bring it up and say stuff to, do your friends still talk? Do you have friends that don't talk about it still to this day?
Um, I it's 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 kind of weird. I After the incident happened, I think pretty shallow. I was distraught. I was traumatized,
Yeah.
and I didn't talk about it fully all the time. And I was starting college, after that, and I
Hmm.
would hear his name. I'd be at the college, and I'd hear roll call, and the professor would name Jordan. Somebody would be named Jordan
Oh
in the
gosh.
classroom, and I just remember running out of the classroom and running to my car. And for my entire like class session, I would be in my car crying in the college parking lot.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't get through my freshman year of college, and it took me a while. Like I'm 28 and I'm still trying to, get my life together. It took me a few years to really I would break down and cry about it every time, and it wasn't that it just traumatized me. My intake on it was that I tried to save someone's life and I felt like I absolutely failed. I was holding him and I let him go. So the feeling that I had, literally, this is deep. The feeling that I
Yeah.
had, it was almost like I had committed a murder. Like
Mm-hmm.
I felt like letting him go to his death, like it was
Oh,
me. It was
Yeah.
my fault. So it hit me much harder than anybody could ever imagine or understand. I felt like I really killed someone.
Yep. Well, I
And
think that's why you're
You,
on our podcast because
yes,
so one, I think I really appreciate all the vulnerability and what you shared right there. But I think so many of, I have a friend who's been a lifeguard for a long time, and just 2 years ago, he witnessed something, and he knows that he did everything he could,
mhm,
but that right there, he can't talk. He won't
it
talk
doesn't
to
go
us.
away.
Well, he
Yeah,
wants to talk to somebody about it, so he talks to me because I'm in the aquatic field and I've known him
sure.
since before I had children, and he feels safe to talk to me. But I think so many people, like for you to say you hear his name and his roll call, and you were crying in your car. I think they need to know that that's okay, and that's part of the grieving process, and
yeah, it
that's
is.
how it feels. And I mean, and that was years after this happened, and I think that's a lot of what people
It's
neglected.
universal.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Mhm.
I was 21 when I saved the little girl, and she lived, but my adrenaline was so high running to the rescue, and so many lifeguards take this job at 15 and 16, and
Hmm.
then there's a bad outcome and the person doesn't make it. And just like you, Emily, they tried, and you can't always save them,
Right.
even though you
Yeah,
try.
And
yeah,
parents and man and they what
Management.
yeah, and again, I tie it back to how we started this conversation of the local community, of the local firemen that had to be in the police in the 6 hours, and the local hospital. Everybody in your town was engaged in this event, whether they wanted to be or not, and that happens all over the country. And I think again, your vulnerability is humbling, but also the relatability that if you're in aquatics or you're a parent or you run a park, this is a real emotion that hits in every aspect. And again, you haven't spent 30 of your years of your life trying to run aquatics. Thank God for you. You're smarter than all of us. But also what you experience is what we all work through. And so I think, again, anybody listening to this, please share this with your staff, share this with your neighbors and friends, because this is a real person who doesn't drink up chlorine every day, who doesn't blow a whistle every day, but has an understanding of what aquatics can be on all sides of it. And I just think you're so valuable to what we do and what we're trying to do. So again, thank you.
yeah. Thank you so much for saying that. Um, if there's anything that I could do to help people, I'll say this. I know that when people go through tragic incidents like this, people turn to negative things to help them cope, whether it be drinking, whether it be drugs, whether it be, people have their vices they turn to. For me, I was quiet. I was shallow for a little while. I was very depressed. I blamed myself a lot. I blamed myself pretty hard. But after talking to friends and family who really were my backbone, they were my support, the more that I kept talking about the situation, the more that it helped. And I
Good.
actually have heard other people's stories, and not saying that it took away from my story being any less worse or not, but I've heard of other people going through, some pretty bad things. And in my mind, I was like, if that person has been through that and they can be this strong,
Yeah.
then there's every
Oh,
possibility for me to start being strong. And it took me years. It did. It took me. That happened when I was 17, and I'm 28 now, and I'm just now getting to where I'm strongly coming out and really talking about it.
Yeah.
And I have talked about it, to friends and family that
sure.
I'm comfortable with, but talking out in public a little bit harder. But
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Strength is a great word.
Strength
yeah,
is a huge word. So,
Yeah.
Emily, before you agreed,
Yeah.
so I met her, West, because she needed CPR, so she called the Brunswick CPR lady.
CPR training, I'm assuming.
Yes, she
yeah.
needed a
Okay.
certificate for her job. But this came up, and I said, "Oh, would you be a guest on my podcast?" And she said, "Yes." She was ready to talk, and she said she actually finds it helpful in the healing process. Can you just use your words there and not what I just said?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely, and like I said, I've met people who's been through some pretty bad situations, and I've seen other people that has positively gotten through it and been very strong. So it's helped me, and I just hope that if anybody's been through similar situation like what I've
Hmm.
been through, in these accidental drowning. I've had so many people tell me it's not your fault, even though I really felt like it was my fault. There has to come a time where you have to forgive yourself because these things happen. And, afterwards, it is nice to be more involved in the public. And yes, I do want to get my CPR certification and everything. I want to learn more. And I love being involved in the community as far as aquatics and stuff because I think that it's nice to do. I think that everyone should have a little bit of training, in their younger years. These kids out here. I was a kid when it happened to me.
Yeah,
And I was a lifeguard for a little bit, and and nothing happened during my lifeguard experience. But I knew that I had to act on it when it happened to me, and so I did. But no, I just hope that whoever hears this, whoever's listening to it, that if they've been through a similar situation, that they understand and know that it's not their fault. And it may take time. It took me
sure.
time. It
Yeah,
did. It took time. I had to forgive myself, but in that moment, I also have to think like I did risk my life to trying to save someone
You
else.
did.
heroic too.
Yeah.
So, and Nicole maybe will forgive me later, but I have played this clip of Goodwill Hunting and Robin Williams at the end of the scene many times for my lifeguards and staff. The "It's Not Your Fault" scene because it's so powerful, but it also hits home. And I think you drive a great message of that, whether it's a movie clip or whether it's reality. Is you were 17 and things happen, and the fact that you're willing to share this story again, I go back to the audience, I go back to the people we've gathered our world around, Nicole, and encourage them to share this story and share this message that people are here to hear you, and this is a community-based support, and again, we're so grateful and humbled by your story, Emily, so thank you.
Thank
Before
you
we
guys.
close, I've
Yeah.
got one more question for you. What would you say to someone who's never really thought about a drowning before, or maybe someone who has that mentality where my kid's a swimmer, they're fine, or
Mhm.
I can
I can
swim.
swim across the lake, my kid can swim across the lake,
Right. Well, and I don't think you ever thought you weren't going to make it. You thought you were
right?
going to make it.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think Jordan thought he would have made it too. Like, I don't think he
Bingo.
did that
Yeah,
intentionally.
right.
Um, and once you're in that panic, your brain pretty much shuts off and it's fight or flight. You just want to live and
Yeah.
you are struggling. But what would you say to somebody who really never considered that to be something that could happen to them?
I think me being a 17-year-old, a teenage girl, I thought that maybe I was a little bit invincible. Like things like that weren't going to happen. I wasn't going to experience things like that. I think that's pretty common with kids or teenagers. They just don't expect it and they don't think that things are going to happen to them. I mean, it happens to adults too. People,
Hmm.
live their lives not thinking that at any moment something really tragic could happen.
Hmm.
And that's the thing is when you get put in that fight or flight, you got to act. And but some people don't. Some people get stuck in that bystander effect, and it's just one of them things. I think that it is very good for people to venture out and maybe look into CPR, maybe look into lifeguard training, maybe look into these things like be proactive, in the community and in the public, just in case, kids, teenagers, there's all kind of teenagers are by pools if they're by a beach, be a lifeguard, like, get some training. I really think that that's very helpful. I wish that I had a little bit more training as a lifeguard before it happened to me. But like I said, it's inevitable, and people are walking this earth and they never think that these tragic moments are going to happen until it does. So
There's been almost one drowning per day this summer in Lake Michigan in the Great Lakes, well, almost one a day this summer. So to your point, it's 14, 15, however many, 11 years later, and it's still international, all across the country, all across the world in lakes. That stat was on the news yesterday, almost one per day in the last 6 weeks. So again, to your point, it's real, and it has real emotions and real impact too. So yeah.
Well, thank you again I
Yes.
just want to say that your voice matters, and I know Wes and the whole Navigating Neva audience will say the same thing, but I believe that you sharing your story, you're protecting others and you're helping others. And if
Hmm.
someone listening to this has been through something similar, and what would you want them to hear right now? This is your final goodbye.
So my last thing is that, guys, it did happen to me as a teenager, and it did traumatize me for a while. It took me time, but I do highly encourage anybody that's ever been through a situation like this to talk about it. You have to get out. You can't be in this shallow shell like I was for the first 3, 4 years of my life when it happened. Talk about it. Get out there. Reach out to your friends. Reach out to your family. If you know of
We're
anybody
here.
who's been through similar situations, talk to them, like reach out to them, like, hey, I'm also hurting too, but maybe we can help each other because it can do a world of good. Um,
Great message. Yeah. Thank you for your bravery, and thank you for your discussion and just being so honest. And again, we hope that people understand this hits home in all aspects. So, and you got me to cry twice, which is very impressive. So, anyway, thank you. And yes, Nicole, I'll let you sign us off as you always do so lovely.
Yes, I don't think she wanted you to cry, but
That's fair.
but I get
That's
it.
fair.
Okay, so if you guys are listening and if there's somebody that you love or even you that's listening and you've witnessed a water tragedy, please know that you're not alone. I am going to link the International Lifeguard Critical Response information in our podcast, like I always do. Wes is one of their volunteers, but I'm here to support them and let everybody know
Yeah.
that they exist because I needed them when I was 21 and they weren't there. And if today's episode moved you, please share it because one story can save another. So you guys can find it if you're listening on Spotify. We also have it on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, it's on Spotify and Apple Play, so you can share that link or just tell people to come listen to the episode, and maybe we'll make a big difference in somebody's life or somebody who's struggling, and that's what we're here for, and that's what today was for.
We're
All
on the
right.
verge of 10,000 downloads, so be one of the 10,000. We hit 5,000 a few weeks ago, so keep those numbers going, everybody. We appreciate all the ears.
All right, guys, take care. Have a great night.
Thanks.